This is part two of our study of Egyptian art. And this time, at the end of this series that we're presenting, we want to look at two notable pharaohs. Tutankhamun, who is known not necessarily for his accomplishments or maybe conquering. He was not that at all. He was born when he became pharaoh when he was 9. He died when he was 19. But his tomb is the only tomb that has been found intact. And even there we saw some pilferage and robbery that had taken place. The second pharaoh we want to talk about in this video presentation is Ramesses II. We heard about Seti, we heard about Ramesses, we heard about other Ramesses that followed, but the one we call Ramesses the Great is Ramesses II. Both were Negroid men, people who came from the area we call today Ethiopia, and their features clearly depict what they must have looked like. They were, and Tutankhamun, particularly that we want to talk about now, his tomb was found in 1922 by Howard Carter. Howard Carter had Lord Carnarvon had given him grant after grant, and they said this is the last time. And finally, a young lad found a step, and they knew they were looking for 16 steps, and that was the key to the discovery of the tomb of Tutankhamun in 1922. When that word hit, I mean, the news media, all the newspapers, this was great news because we had seen and we were able to discover just what the Egyptians thought, what their beliefs, their commitment, their skills. And here we see one of the sarcophagi of Tutankhamun, because he was placed into really like 4 coffins, and we want to see that momentarily. But when a king died, like Tutankhamun, the god Anubis, who's called the jackal god that you see the image on the left, would be involved in an elaborate embalming process. It would take sometimes 60 and 70 days for them to wash the body, to drain the body of blood, to remove organs that would go into the canoptic jars that we talked about earlier. And then they would do a carefully embalming and wrapping in order to prepare for a mummy that would go down into different sarcophagi, one larger than the other. You see the one behind Anubis there, very high sarcophagus and coffin, because the coffins would be placed on top of one another. And they would spend this time preparing the body for a mummy. Then they would place it in the mummy, and as you can see there are 4 different mummy sarcophagi in which the body of Tutankhamun was placed. And so you see on the side, now that's gold plated. In other words, they would melt gold and then apply it to the wood. But the mass down on the bottom right is solid gold. And it was so heavy, they said that when they went to remove it from the tomb of Tutankhamun, they needed a pulley in order to pull it up. It was so heavy. Tutankhamun's treasure gives us a lot of keys in terms of the life of the Egyptian during this New Kingdom period. We're looking at his throne there, as he had engraved, he sitting there talking to his wife, Ankhesenamun. But he reigned from 1334 to 1324 BC, and he became pharaoh, as I said before, when he was 9 years of age. He died when he was 19, and many believe that he was murdered or killed because they found his mummy, and they've examined the DNA, and they've examined the skull, and they see indications where he was hit or had a concussion. As I said before, the only tomb found not pillaged and robbed was the tomb of Tutankhamun. It was located in the Valley of the Kings because the early pharaohs had built these large pyramids, but everyone knew there was a treasure inside. So when they moved to what we call the necropolis up in the Valley of the Kings, about 200 miles from Memphis or Cairo, you couldn't find them. In other words, where no one would know where they were buried. And they moved up this necropolis, or the Valley of the Kings, or the King's burial ground, moved it up and around Thebes. So this was quite a discovery, to find the remains and intact representation of Tutankhamun's reign. And we can study him, and we can study his beliefs and his our class. I took one of the class to the Metropolitan Museum where we studied the paintings of the Egyptians. But this is what Tutankhamun looked like. He had the crook and the flail, which is the cross member, and the hook there, which represents that of a shepherd. The flail, that where he guided the sheep or those who came under his rulership. And the piece on the left, where Tutankhamun is painted black, I have a replica of that here in my study. But unlike the Great Pyramids of Giza, where you had two Cheops, the Great Pyramid of Giza, sometimes called the Pyramid of Khufu, had 2 million 70-ton blocks and had to be moved. But up in the Valley of the King, it was buried so it would not be seen. And as you can see, on the bottom left, this is the way the tomb looks today. Whenever I go up there, and I'm visiting in Egypt, and I've been fortunate enough to visit Egypt 9 times, and whenever I go up there, I always like to be out by 10:30 because it's about 140 degrees. But look at the mountains around there. It would be almost impossible to discover a tomb like Tutankhamun's. But Howard Carter, the man you see with the mustache up on the left, he finally got down to the basic mummy of Tutankhamun. And, of course, they brought the treasure out piece by piece. Howard Carter was the individual who discovered the tomb. He would be what we would call an Egyptologist, a person who really focuses in on the academic study and the finding of archaeology related to Egypt. So he discovered the tomb on November the 25th, 1922. It was financed by a very wealthy Englishman. He was known as the Earl of Carnarvon, and he too was an Egyptologist, and he kept funding money looking for this tomb. Carter lived near the Nile River, and always was looking for 16 steps. And finally, the young lad found one of the steps. And here you see Carter and Carnarvon together because as soon as he discovered it, he wired Carnarvon, and Carnarvon came from England to Egypt as fast as he could come to see this great treasure that had been unearthed. That's Carter's house. sat on top of the hill, and believe it or not, it was within vision of his house. He could look out after they discovered it and see Tutankhamun's tomb. So what an exciting time it was in 1922 when they found this tomb intact. You can see on the gold mask the cobra, which is the symbol of royalty, and then on the right, a little closer view of that relief that was gold plated, as gold plated there, and that's the king talking to his wife, and her name is Akhenaten. They believe to be the third daughter of Nefertiti. And so that was the chair that he would sit in. If you go to the Egyptian Museum, you will see this. And they have replicas you can buy. Here are some sculptural portraits of Tutankhamun. On the left, you have alabaster, which is very heavy. That piece there would probably weigh about 150 pounds because alabaster is very heavy. And the one on the right is terracotta. But you can see the young boy king. These were some of the games found in the tomb, somewhat similar to chess and checkers. And they thought that if they put these games there, he would have them to play with each and every day. And then there's the other king that we just want to look at quickly, Ramesses II. Sometimes spelled with one S, sometimes spelled with two S's. But he's called Ramesses the Great. And you can see by his features, he too was Negroid. That's his mummy down at the bottom of the page. But all of the representational presentations of Ramesses II, or better still, Ramesses the Great, you will see as this figure who is royal looking. He lived and he was pharaoh for over 60-some years. And he built a tomb in a place called Abu Simbel. And it was scheduled to be over flooded when they got ready to do the Aswan Dam. They felt, are we going to feed millions of people, or are we going to preserve this art treasure, which would have been underwater? So Jacqueline Kennedy and a number of finance people, wealthy people, got together and they financed raising this tomb of Ramesses II up 200 feet so that people could visit it. And there are many stories. I'm reading a book right now, Ramesses II and His Time. This book is fascinating because there was a relationship between Ramesses II and Nebuchadnezzar. And of course, Ramesses would have a driver and he would be pictured as a warrior, particularly when they discuss the Battle of Kadesh. And of course, that battle, according to Ramesses, he won it. According to the Hittites, they won that battle. But here is Ramesses II. They said that he fathered more than 141 children in his tenure. He lived to be 92 years old. And a man with no hospitalization, no medical, but having attention given to him. To live to be 92, it was quite a fascinating thing. So they built up by the city of Aswan, this large dam, which would feed thousands of people, matter of fact, millions of people. And so they had to raise the tomb up. And here is the tomb of Ramesses II. You go inside and down a hall, but the pharaohs wanted to make it clear, even in their imagery, that this was Pharaoh was the king. He was large. You are made to feel small around the Pharaoh. And of course, look at the size of this piece that you see. And you go into the tomb and you see replica after replica of Ramesses II. But when you come out of the tomb and you look around you, you see how they raised this tomb up 200 feet so that the Aswan Dam, that waterway, could flow and feed millions of people and control the Nile. Prior to that time, the Nile had overflooded every year and sometimes would cause conditions which created problems and also would cause sickness. So what they did was they redirected the Nile, the power of the Nile, the force of the Nile, in what is called the Aswan Dam. And today, many people drink clean water because of that engineering project. But this is inside Ramesses II's tomb. And of course, we know that was created after he died because you see the crook and the flail. And much of what we see about Tutankhamun and Ramesses is in the Egyptian Museum. The Egyptian Museum is not the fanciest one. It's very hard for the government to come up with the money to keep these treasures in good shape. But much of what is known about Egypt, and even for that matter, talking about the Israelites coming out of Egypt, is found in an inscription, hieroglyphics inscription, right here in this museum. What a fantastic place it is to be in the Egyptian Museum and see the full Tutankhamun exhibition. Then to come out and sail on the Nile River, sail as we see the Aswan and we see the sailboats, and many times we can sail and it's almost like a ferry. In other words, it's almost like a ship has booths, and you can take a cruise down the Nile. And of course, what a fascinating thing that is to go from the Nile River and come down to Cairo. So we want you to see that Egypt is a fantastic place to study. Tutankhamun, Howard Carter, all the things that we see here on the Nile is one of those boats that would bring you down, had cabins in it, and of course you can take what is a Nile cruise. But we look at the way the Egyptians saw the god Amun-Ra, the sun god, and we even see in those early days how 2500 BC, the homes and the tombs of those who labored at the great tomb of Cheops. So today, you can go and visit another city, the capital city of Alexandria. What a fascinating place it is, and of course, by the Red Sea. Place after place, Egypt is a rich and exciting experience for everyone. The temple at Karnak and Luxor, and we see the row of the Sphinx row as you go into the temple. You see the Luxor temple at night. And of course, in many places where you travel throughout the world, you have a light show. And so it is in Egypt. We have this light show of the Luxor temple in Karnak. So as we leave Egypt, it is important to remember there were many pharaohs, but the two that I've chosen to focus in on was Tutankhamun, one because most of his treasure was found intact, and of course Ramesses II, who built so much within his 60-some year reign or his 92-year life. Notice the obelisk there with the hieroglyphics on it, and as you go to Rome and you go to Greece and you go places in the world, they always have an obelisk symbolizing that they have conquered Egypt at some time. So This is Egypt. This is a presentation of Tut